You can stop bracing yourself now. I mean it. Whatever you walked in here holding, that tightness in your chest, that quiet readiness for the next blow, you can set it down. Because the thing you've been waiting to hear, the confirmation you stopped asking for out loud because you were tired of being disappointed, it already came. It came before you clicked. Heaven already ruled on your case. And the verdict is not what the enemy whispered to you in the dark. You passed. I know how that lands, because I know what you've survived to get to a sentence like that. You've heard "you passed" before, from people who didn't know what the test even was. Teachers, bosses, family members who clapped at the wrong moments and went silent at the ones that mattered. So when I say it, part of you flinches, because part of you has learned that good news is usually the setup for a longer fall. Not this time. This time, the one confirming it is not impressed by your performance, because he was never grading your performance. He was watching something underneath all of it. He was watching whether you'd still reach for him when the reaching cost you everything. And you did. Bruised, confused, half convinced you were doing it wrong, you still reached. That's the test. That's the whole test. And it's finished. And I want to name the lie that's been sitting on you, because I carried it for years, and it nearly buried me. The lie says the test was about being good enough. It says somewhere there's a standard you kept falling short of. And if you'd just prayed harder, sinned less, believed bigger, you'd have qualified. So you've spent your life auditioning for a part you were already cast in, striving for a seat that already had your name carved into it. Do you know how exhausting it is to fight for something you already have? That exhaustion you feel in your bones. Some of it is just the tiredness of a person trying to earn what was always a gift. Let me tell you why I can speak to you like this, with this kind of certainty, and then I'm going to show you exactly what was confirmed about your life, what every hard year was actually building, and why the very thing that nearly broke you was the proof you belonged to him all along. My name is George. I didn't come to this the easy way, and I'm not going to pretend I did. For a long stretch of my life, I was the man doing everything right on the outside and dying on the inside, praying prayers I didn't believe would be answered. Going to church and leaving emptier than I came, carrying a weight I couldn't name, and being told by good, sincere people that if I just had more faith, it would lift. It didn't lift, and the cruelest part was that I started to believe the weight was the problem, when the weight was actually the calling pressing down, looking for a door. So when I talk about being chosen, I'm not talking about a feeling that floats by on a good Sunday. I'm talking about a thing that has hunted you your whole life, a thing that wouldn't let you settle. A thing that ruined the comfortable version of your life on purpose, because comfortable would have buried you. And here's where it gets real. The number in the title of this video, the 144,000. Most people hear that and immediately do math. They start counting. They start wondering if they made the cut, like it's a stadium with a limited number of seats, and they're stuck at the gate. But that was never what that number was pointing to. Open the book of Revelation, and you don't find a head count. You find a seal. You find a mark placed on the forehead of those who belong to him, set apart before the trouble came, named before the shaking started. The number isn't the point. The seal is the point. The being known in advance is the point. And that, friend, is what was confirmed over you. Think about that for a second. Before you understood any of this, before you had the language, before you found this video, you were already marked, sealed, spoken for. The ache you felt that nobody else seemed to feel. That wasn't malfunction. That was the seal making itself known from the inside, the way a wound aches before a storm. You were never broken. You were branded. And here's something about a seal that I want you to hold on to. In the old world, a seal wasn't decoration. When a king sealed a letter, he pressed his ring into hot wax, and that mark meant two things at once. It meant ownership, this belongs to me, and it meant protection. Break this seal and you answer to the one whose mark it carries. A sealed thing was a guarded thing. The seal was a warning to anyone who touched it. There's a king behind this. So when I tell you that you for the trouble came, I'm not talking about a pretty spiritual idea. I'm talking about why you're still here. You have been through things that should have ended you. You know the moments I mean. The ones you've never told anybody. The nights you're not sure how you made it to morning. Why are you still standing? It wasn't your strength. We already talked about Gideon's 300. Your strength got stripped down to almost nothing more than once. You're still standing because there's a king behind the seal, and everything that came at you had to answer to him first. The enemy could press. The enemy could not break the wax. Think about Daniel for a moment. A young man taken far from home, dropped into a foreign empire that wanted to rename him, retrain him, rebuild him into someone who'd forget where he came from. And he refused quietly, without making a show of it, to bend on the things that marked him as gods. He kept praying with his windows open, even after praying was made a crime, even when keeping that one habit was going to cost him his life. And it did get him thrown into a den of lions, sealed in with a stone, left overnight with animals built to tear him apart. But here's the part I want you to sit with. The king who'd been tricked into condemning him couldn't sleep that night. He paced, and at first light he ran to that den and called down into the dark, voice cracking, "Is your God, the one you serve without ceasing, able to save you?" And up out of the pit came Daniel's voice, calm. "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths." The lions were still there. The teeth were still there. The danger was every bit as real as it looked. What changed was that something stood between Daniel and the thing meant to destroy him, and that something had a name, and it was sent. That's what the seal does. It doesn't always remove you from the den. Sometimes it shuts the mouths while you're still inside it. You've spent whole seasons sealed in, with things that should have devoured you, and you came out in the morning able to say the same thing Daniel said. I don't fully understand how, but something held the danger back. That something was the king behind the seal, sending what he needed to send to keep what belonged to him. Let me take you somewhere. There was a boy named Samuel sleeping in the house of God, and in the deep of the night a voice called his name. He didn't recognize it. He got up and ran to the old priest, certain he'd been summoned. "Here I am, you called me." And the old man, half asleep, said, "I didn't call you. Go back and lie down." This happened again and again. 3 times the boy heard his name, and 3 times he ran to the wrong door, because he had no framework for the idea that heaven itself would call a boy by name in the dark. I want you to sit in that for a moment, because I think you've lived it. How many times has something stirred you awake, a knowing, a heaviness, a pull toward God you couldn't explain, and you ran to the wrong door with it? You took it to a person who couldn't carry it. You took it to a habit that numbed it. You took it to a doctor, to a bottle, to a relationship, to a screen, to anything that might explain the voice, without you having to face what it actually was. And every one of those doors said the same thing the old priest said. "I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." But the voice kept coming, didn't it? That's the part nobody could explain to you. The voice kept coming, because it wasn't the priest calling, and it wasn't your circumstances calling. It was God, and God does not stop saying your name just because you keep knocking on the wrong door. And here's what most people miss. The boy only finally answered correctly when the old priest told him what to say. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Somebody had to confirm to him that the voice was real before he could turn and face it. That's part of why you're here. I'm the old priest in this moment, and I'm telling you plainly. The voice you've been hearing your whole life is not your imagination. It is not your instability. It is not a thing to medicate away. It's him. And he's been calling you by name since before you knew how to listen. So let's talk about what you endured. Because the title says it was worth it, and I don't say things like that lightly. I've watched too much suffering to ever stand in front of a camera and slap a bow on someone's pain. So let me be careful and honest at the same time. Not everything you suffered was sent by God. I won't tell you that. Some of it was just the broken world breaking on you, and some of it was caused by people who should have protected you and didn't. I won't dishonor your story by calling cruelty a blessing. But here is what I will tell you, and I'll stake my own scarred life on it. There was not one season he wasted. Not one. The pit your own brothers threw you into. And yes, I'm thinking of Joseph now. The favorite son sold by his own blood for the price of a slave. That pit was real, and the betrayal was real, and the years in a foreign prison for a crime he didn't commit were real and long and silent. And here's where it shifted. The same gift that got Joseph thrown in the pit, that dreaming, that seeing, that knowing, was the exact gift that walked him out of prison and into the second highest seat in the kingdom. The thing his brothers hated him for was the thing that ended up saving their lives. Read that again slowly. The gift that made you a target is the gift that's about to make you a deliverer. What did they call you? What was the word that got attached to you early? By a parent, a teacher, a sibling, the kids at school. Too much, too sensitive, too intense, too deep, too strange, too quiet, too in your head. They handed you that word like a sentence, and you've been serving it ever since, apologizing for the very wiring God installed before you were born. But the Lord doesn't call the things he made too much. He calls them set apart. What the world labeled excess, heaven labeled equipment. You were not given more sensitivity so you'd suffer more. You were given more sensitivity because you were built to feel what others can't feel and carry what others can't carry. That's not a defect. That's a deployment. And I need to say something here, gently, because I love you enough to be careful. If you are carrying a heaviness in your body right now, if your sleep is broken, if your chest is tight, if something physical is wrong, please, hear me. See a doctor. Let the people God put on this earth to care for bodies care for yours. Spiritual calling and physical health are not enemies. The same God who marked your spirit made your body and gave us the wisdom to tend it. Don't let anyone, including the well-meaning voice in your own head, talk you out of getting real help for a real thing. Heaven is not asking you to choose between faith and care. It never was now. Let me tell you about the prayers. The title says he heard every prayer, and I want to slow all the way down here, because this is where so many of us got wounded. You prayed. You prayed in the hospital hallway. You prayed in the car, in the parking lot before you could make yourself walk in. You prayed the prayer you couldn't even finish because the words turned to crying halfway through. And from where you were standing, it looked like the prayers hit the ceiling and slid back down. It looked like silence. It felt like being ignored by the only one you had left. I'm telling you, the silence was not absence. There was a woman named Hannah who went up to the house of the Lord year after year with a wound that wouldn't close. She wanted a child and couldn't have one, and the ache had hollowed her out so deeply that when she finally went in to pray, her lips moved but no sound came out. The priest watching her thought she was drunk, thought she was a mess, thought she was out of her mind. The man whose job it was to recognize true prayer looked right at the realest prayer in the room and called it disgrace. That's happened to you, hasn't it? Your deepest prayer got mistaken for your breakdown. The very moment you were most connected to heaven, the people around you decided you were falling apart. Let me free you from their verdict right now. When Hannah finally spoke, she said, "I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord." And the priest's whole posture changed. "Go in peace," he said, "and the God of Israel grant your petition." She didn't have the baby yet. Nothing in her circumstances had moved. But something had been confirmed in the unseen, and she got up from that floor and ate, and her face was no longer downcast. The answer registered in heaven before it ever showed up on earth. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand about every prayer you thought God ignored. It registered. The receipt exists. The fact that you couldn't see the answer yet does not mean the answer wasn't already granted. He heard everyone. The whispered ones, the angry ones, the ones you're embarrassed about now, the ones where you yelled at him and then apologized and then yelled again. He heard the prayer, underneath the prayer, the one your soul was praying when your mouth had run out of acceptable words, and not one of them slid back down the wall. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived. Things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with a full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. I tell you about the keys because I needed them myself. I spent years feeling the call and having no language for it. And language is not a small thing. Language is the difference between drowning in a feeling and learning to swim in it. When you can finally name what's been moving in you, the shame loses its grip, because shame can only survive in the part of you that has no words. Now let me come back to the hardest line in that title. 8 billion failed. You passed. I know how that can sound. It can sound like the kind of spiritual arrogance that's done real damage in the church. The idea that you're in and everyone else is out, that you're better, that you can look down from some balcony at the masses below. Throw that idea out. That is not the Spirit. That is pride wearing a religious mask, and it will rot you from the inside. Here's the truth underneath the headline. The test was never a competition with 8 billion other people. You weren't racing anyone. The failing the world is doing isn't a moral scoreboard. It's the simple fact that most people are sleeping through the call, not because they're wicked, Because the voice is quiet and the world is loud, and it is so much easier to roll over and go back to sleep than to sit up in the dark and say, "Speak, Lord." You sat up. That's it. That's what you passed. Not a morality exam. Not a holiness contest where you outperformed your neighbor. You passed the only test that the sealed ones ever face. When heaven called and the cost was real and every door you knew said go back to sleep, you stayed awake. You kept reaching. You're reaching right now, this very second, which is the only reason these words are landing somewhere soft in you instead of bouncing off. Think of Gideon, hiding in a winepress, threshing wheat in secret because he was terrified of the enemy, the least in his family, the weakest tribe. And the angel of the Lord walks up to this trembling man in his hiding place and calls him. I want you to hear the exact words, mighty warrior, to a man who was hiding. Gideon basically said, "You've got the wrong guy. If God is with us, why is all this happening? Where are the miracles our fathers told us about?" He argued. He asked for sign after sign because he could not believe heaven was talking to someone like him, and God was patient with every single doubt. He didn't strike Gideon down for asking, he gave him the signs. He met the trembling man exactly where the trembling man was, and he called him by who he was going to be, not by where he was hiding. That's how heaven sees you. Not the version of you that's afraid in the winepress. The mighty warrior the fear has been wrapped around the whole time, and there's something in that story people skip right past. When God finally went to use Gideon, the first thing he did was make the army smaller. Gideon showed up with 32,000 men, and God said, "That's too many." Sent them home in waves until there were 300 left. 300 against an army you couldn't count. Why would God do that? Why strip away the very strength you'd think he'd want? Because he was never relying on the numbers. He never is. He didn't want anyone walking away from that battle saying their own arm had saved them. He wanted it clear, undeniable, embarrassing even, that the victory came from him. And I think a lot of you have lived a version of that. You watched God let your supports get stripped away one by one. The friends thinned out. The safety net came down. The strength you used to lean on left the room, and you stood there with almost nothing, feeling abandoned, feeling set up to fail. You weren't being set up to fail. You were being reduced to the 300, so that when the victory came, there'd be no question in your own mind about who actually won it. Let me give you one more, because this one I carry close. Elijah, fresh off the greatest victory of his life. Fire falling from heaven in front of the whole nation. The prophets of a false god defeated. The people on their faces. And the very next thing we find him doing is sitting under a broom tree in the wilderness, asking God to let him die. The mountaintop and the pit, separated by a single chapter. He had won, and he wanted to be done. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Empty in the place where the victory should have filled him up. And how did God deal with his exhausted prophet? Not with a lecture. Not with a list of everything Elijah was doing wrong. He sent an angel to let the man sleep, and then to feed him, and then to let him sleep again. Twice. Rest, then bread, then rest again. He restored the body before he ever addressed the spirit. Only after Elijah was fed and rested did God speak. And even then he didn't come in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire. He came in a low whisper, a sound so gentle Elijah had to go still to even hear it. I tell you that because some of you have done the great thing, the faithful thing, and you're sitting under your own broom tree wondering why the victory feels like ashes. Hear me, that emptiness after the win is not a sign that you failed or that God left. Sometimes the most spiritual thing in the world is to eat something and sleep. Heaven knows the difference between a spirit that's run dry and a body that's simply run out, and it does not condemn the second one. It feeds it. And if that tiredness in you has gone deeper than rest can reach, if it's the kind of heaviness that started whispering that the world would be better without you, please don't carry that alone and don't call it weak faith. Tell someone safe. Reach for real help. The same God who fed Elijah put people in your life to feed you too, and letting them is not a failure of faith, it's obedience. So what now? What do you do with a confirmation like this? You stop apologizing for the wiring. You stop running to the wrong door with the voice. You stop letting the people who mistook your prayer for your breakdown tell you who you are. And you start living like a person whose verdict already came back in their favor. Because it did. The shaking around you isn't going to stop because you woke up. If anything, when the sealed ones come awake, the resistance gets louder. The way the boy Samuel's calling didn't make his life simpler. It made him the voice nobody wanted to hear. Being chosen has never meant being comfortable. It has meant being kept. There's a difference, and the difference is everything. You will not be comfortable, but you will be kept. I want to leave you with one image, and then I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it. Picture the boy Samuel one more time, not running to the wrong door anymore. Lying back down in the dark, heart pounding, finally understanding. And when the voice comes the fourth time and says his name, Samuel, Samuel, he doesn't run anywhere. He stays exactly where he is, and he says the words that change everything. Speak. I'm listening. That's the whole posture. Not striving, not performing, not racing 8 billion strangers to some finish line. Just staying still in the dark long enough to finally say back to the one who has been calling your name your entire life, I hear you, I'm here. I'm not running to the wrong door anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. You passed because you stayed awake. Now stay. Here's what I want from you, and I don't want a generic word in the comments. I want the real one. I want you to tell me about the door. The wrong door you kept running to with the voice. The person, the place, the habit. The thing you took your calling to because you didn't know it was God yet. Name it. Was it a parent who called you too much? A doctor's office? A bottle? A relationship you thought would quiet the ache? Tell me the door you finally stopped running to. And if you haven't stopped yet, tell me that too, and I'll be praying for you by name. Don't write Amen. Write the door. Because the moment you can name it out loud is the moment it stops being able to send you back to sleep.